Happy Friday, everybody. I am happy and a little bit flustered to be here. So, today is going to be, well, today has been a lot of work because, as I have been telling you, I'm at the Lacombe Farmers Market in central Alberta on Fridays, and so I don't get done there until 1 o'clock, and so I don't get home until almost 2, but that's okay. Today we are going to be making yeast bread. And I know you think that on keto that isn't a thing, but I'm here to show you that it is a thing. So let's get started. Now we're not going to finish this today, but we're going to finish it together on Sunday. So I will show you the product of our work on Sunday. Now, first thing that we need is a measuring cup with 120 milliliters of water in it. Now it's important that you make sure that your water is between 108 and 113 degrees Fahrenheit because we're going to add yeast to this. We're going to add 2 teaspoons of yeast, and we are also, and you're going to be shocked to see this in my house, but it's here nonetheless, we're going to add 1.5 teaspoons, if I can get this off there. We're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of maple syrup, and this is the only non-keto item that lives in my house anymore. And the reason that it's here is because this is what we're going to feed the yeast with. Yeast they are very hungry little wee beasties, and they love sugar. So we are going to give them something natural. So about 1.5 teaspoons of maple syrup is going to go in this water. And that way those little wee beasties have got something to eat. Okay, now we'll get this tucked away back in the darkest corner of the cupboard because we don't need it very often. Okay, now we have our maple syrup in there. We're going to add 2 teaspoons of yeast. You just want to sprinkle this in and let it sink to the bottom. And then we're going to give this about 15 or 20 minutes just to kick in and do its little yeasty thing. Okay. Now we're just going to set this aside. Now you can, let's see if we can set this where you can see it. There you go. You can watch it do its yeasty thing. Now, while we are waiting for that to happen, get this out of our way, we are going to mix up all of our dry ingredients. Now this is important because once we get this all put together, we're going to want it in a parchment lined loaf pan, and then we need to set it somewhere warm to let it rise for about an hour. Okay, so first thing we are going to add is 170 grams of almond flour. That's what it is. And then 83 grams of ground flax meal. Now this is important. All of these ingredients together are going to make this, it's going to give it a bread-like consistency. And one thing that we have not used very often together, but we are going to use it today, is psyllium husk powder. So we have 18 grams of psyllium husk powder and 15 grams of protein whey isolate. And that we use fairly often. Okay, so we're just going to set these aside so that they're not in our way. Now, next, what do we need next? What do we need next? I'm just kind of losing my mind here. And I just called that psyllium husk, and it was not. That was actually the 2 teaspoons of xanthan gum that we need. This is the 15 grams of protein whey isolate. And then we're going to add, now this doesn't sound like much, but it's important, 1/4 of a teaspoon, just 1/4 of a teaspoon of cream of tartar, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of dried ginger, ground ginger. Now once we get all of the dry ingredients together, we'll get these bowls out of the way. And we are going to find a spoon if we are that lucky. And wouldn't you know, I seem to have gotten them all dirty. Just 1 second and I will grab one. Okay, now we need to make sure that these dry ingredients are really well mixed together, because we don't want lumps of anything. Now, the other thing that I have not put in here yet is 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Now, you guys remember, we've chatted several times about baking powder and how easy it is to make. I'm just getting my teaspoon out here. I like to try and have everything measured before we get together, but this seems to be something that I just sort of missed. Oops. Okay, there we go. Now it is time for me to make some more baking powder, and I only make a wee bit at a time because it does tend to clump, and we don't want clumps of baking powder, so then you have to grind it up. And so I just make a little bit at a time, and that way it doesn't have as long to clump. Now we have all of our dry ingredients together, and you can see if you're watching the yeast that it is starting to do its little yeasty thing. The little wee beasties are eating up that sugar so that we're not going to get it. Okay, now next thing we are going to do is you need 4 eggs. Now here's something that is really important when you're doing this. It's imperative that your eggs are room temperature, because if you take them straight out of the fridge and use them and then you mix the yeast in, you're going to kill the yeast. And if you don't have live yeast, you don't have fluffy bread. So we need 3 egg whites. Now I could have had this done before, but I did not. You know, one of the cool things, I say this all the time about eggs, is they come with their own separator. So if you have an egg separator and you want to use it, that's fine. I like to use the one that comes with the egg. Okay, this egg white does not seem, there we go. Okay, so there's one. And we'll get the second one in there, see if we can make this go. Oh, and well, that just happened. You know what, we are not turning this into a meringue, so it is not a big deal if you have a spot of yolk in there. And we do have to put 1 whole egg in, so we're just going to call that one the whole egg. Now, how many is this? 2 or 3? I think this is the second egg white. Third egg white. Third egg white? Okay.
Second egg white.
Okay. Second egg white. So we need 1 more egg white after this. See what happens when I get all ahead of myself here? So I think I possibly bit off a little more than I could chew on Wednesday when I said we are going to get together and make yeast bread on Friday, because I know what my Fridays look like, but one of my favorite parts of Fridays is hanging out with you guys. Hi, Del. Okay. And this is our last one. Now, I am not tossing these egg yolks out. They are going to be a very pleasant part of my supper, I believe. Okay. There we go. Now, get the rest of that egg white off my hands. Our yeast is starting to do its thing. Now that water, I had poured the water in the measuring cup a few minutes before we got together, and it maybe could have been a little bit warmer, but you know what? It is going to be just fine. Now, I'm going to whip this up, and to it, I am going to add 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Get that out of the way, and Alexa, stop. Now, let me see if I have any, I need a little bit of tin foil, and I'm not sure that I actually have tin foil, but that's okay. because I do have parchment paper and I think that'll work just as well. Now I am going to go and put this over the loaf that is in the oven now. And that is going to stop it from Alexa, set a 40-minute timer.
40 minutes, starting now.
Okay, so now that's going to continue. Now you know my secret. I have one in the oven already. I don't think it's going to be ready before we're done here today, but I will definitely have bread to show you on Sunday. So you don't want to miss part 2 because bread is good for more than just putting butter on, especially at Thanksgiving.
Here's something I found on the web.
Alexa, stop. All right, now we need 56 grams of butter and 58 grams of sour cream. So we're going to get those mixed in here. And we want this whipped up. I could have maybe used a bigger bowl so it wasn't as likely to splash out, but it is just fine. Okay, now we're going to get this all whipped up, and our yeast is still busy yeasting. So I'm going to say that my water was not quite hot enough, but I think it's going to be fine anyway. I am hoping. They're starting to pop up now. Yeah, another minute or so. You can always tell when your yeast is done because you have a big foamy bunch on top. Now, I want to tell you guys about my newest product to the TSL lineup. So I have been, for the last week or so, I have been introducing my poultry seasoning at markets. And it is definitely available for you to order online. If there are things that you need from TSL, please let me know. And I've had a few people ask me, so I am going to share with you, what does TSL stand for? Well, it's not initials of anybody. It is This Shining Life. There you go, TSL. So I want everybody to be living their best version of this shining life, whether it is how they act every day or the food that they're putting in their body. So I'm doing my best to help them do that. Okay, now I'm going to get a bowl of really hot water and set this in there and see if we can't get this yeast a little more excited, because it seems to be not quite excited enough. So we're gonna, oh well. And there you go. See, as soon as I start saying, but we're going to give it a little bit of a hand anyway, because the heat coming from the inside is not going to hurt the yeast, or the heat coming from the outside. And so that's just going to give us a minute to have a chat and talk about what we need to talk about. So if you have any questions, by all means, please let me know. And definitely take a minute to mark Sunday morning at 10 a.m. right here with me on your calendar, so that we can get together and do something wonderful and fun. My favorite part of Thanksgiving dinner is gravy, like we did on Wednesday, and part 2 that we're doing on Sunday. I bet you can guess what it is. And if you can't, you will figure it out when you show up for part 2. Okay, now we are just going to set this in here and hopefully warm it up a little bit, and a little bit more heat coming through that glass. We're not going to let it get ridiculously hot, because we definitely do not want to kill the yeast. But you can see the yeast coming to the top now, and just, you know, that little bit of extra heat is starting to come through the glass, and it's just going to get it all excited and have it eating a lot more sugar. And that's exactly what we want to do. So while we're waiting for that to happen, get your loaf pan out. Now, it's important that your loaf pan is lined with parchment paper. You can do just half of it, or you can do the full length. Either way works. But the parchment paper is important, especially if you're using a glass pan or This is a non-stick pan. It may not be as big a deal, but we're still going to make sure that we have it lined with parchment paper. And that way we don't have to worry about our loaf of bread sticking when it comes out. We can just loosen the sides and then take the whole thing out and it will be good to go. And as long as it took us to do that, look at how excited our yeast has gotten just in a minute or so. It just really does not take long. And once you see that foaming, now this, I like my yeast to usually be a little more excited than this, but it's going to be just fine for this. So we are, now that these little wee beasties have had a chance to get excited, we're going to add this. Just wipe this off. We don't need any extra water in there. And we're going to add this to our butter, sour cream, apple cider vinegar, and egg mixture. Now the apple cider vinegar helps break down the egg yolks, so they're going to combine better. Okay. Now we'll maybe send this over here. Okay, now we're going to get this all beat up. And again, it is so important that this is room temperature because you do not want to kill your yeast. If it's too cold or too hot, it absolutely will. Okay, so now we are going to add this into all of our dry ingredients. And you want to make sure that you get everything out of the bowl. So grab a spatula so you can scrape it. Okay. There, we'll send that one away, and we're just going to get this mixed up. Now remember, we made the baking powder to put in here, so it is single acting baking powder, and that along with the yeast is going to do an absolutely beautiful job of building us this loaf of bread. So you want to get it mixed as quickly as possible. It needs to be thoroughly mixed. So get it mixed up as quickly as possible, and then we're going to put it right in the loaf pan, and it is going to get sit. It's going to get sit. Do you like my English today? Honestly, I'm having one of those days. Okay, so we've got this all mixed. And we're going to get it into our loaf pan, and we're going to let it proof for about an hour. Now you will definitely see a difference in size. See if we can get this in here. And there it goes. This is one of those times when I wish these glass bowls had handles, but more often than not, I'm grateful that they don't. Now, you want to be careful not to get it between the parchment paper. Okay, now since we're still stirring this, kind of, sort of, we can smooth it out a little bit, but you really do need to work quite quickly. So we'll poke it down. There we go. Now, we are going to put that last little bit in there. And we'll send this away too. Now the next part is easy. You do not use the rag that you've been wiping your hands on, but just cover this with a clean cloth. Set it in the sun or set it on top of your stove while you're preheating your oven to 350 degrees. Now at the 15-minute mark, once you get this in the oven, around the 15-minute mark, you want to put some tin foil over it so that it doesn't brown too much, because it does need that full 45 or 50 minutes in the oven so that it is cooked. And then you want to let it cool in the pan. And you don't want to, now one of my favorite parts of baking a yeast bread has always been out of the oven, slice the crust off, slather the butter on and have it. But with this loaf, don't do that. You want to let it cool because that residual heat is going to finish baking the inside, you're going to have a better crumb if you're patient. And I know being patient is hard, but you need to be patient. Okay, so you've got turkey sandwiches on the horizon. It's time to get your mayonnaise made, and make sure that you've got a supply of that in the fridge. So what kind of mayo do you want? Does it need to be a spicy mayo, just a plain mayo? Are you going to use apple cider vinegar to make it, red wine vinegar, white vinegar? Do whatever makes you happy. And just remember that when you're doing that, and we've made mayonnaise here a few times together, make sure that your egg is room temperature, just as they had to be in here. There are some things where eggs can be cold, other things where it just isn't going to work. Making bread or making mayonnaise is two of those things where the eggs really do need to be room temperature if you want to be successful. Okay, so this is part 1 of making bread. Now, when I see you on Sunday, which I hope I will, at 10 a.m. Mountain, I will be here with a fresh loaf of bread, and we'll talk about what happens next. So I will see you Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Mountain. Thank you for joining me, whether you're here live or watching the repeat. Thank you for joining me, and please do your very best to live your best version of this shining life over the weekend. Be kind to everyone.